From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from London, the site of the Economic Summit meeting.
Good evening. Here in London today, the 7 most powerful industrial democracies in the world prepared to agree on the easy issues and stay away from the tough ones. At this 17th Economic Summit, the economic differences among the U.S., Canada, Western Europe, and Japan are just too tough to be resolved, especially with national elections in the not-too-distant future. On top of that, this summit is distracted by the arrival here tomorrow of the Soviet Union's master politician, Mikhail Gorbachev, in search of help. We begin with our White House correspondent, Britt Hume.
Helmut, good morning. How are you?
President Bush today held separate one-on-one talks with the few summit leaders he had not already met with before coming here. With Germany's Kohl and later Italy's Andreotti, Mr. Bush worked to iron out any differences over a common approach to Soviet leader Gorbachev, who will be here later in the week to appeal for help in transforming his country's economy. As the summit began its first full session this afternoon, the impending Gorbachev visit and such other questions as what to do about Iraq's continued nuclear capability overshadowed urgent economic issues. It appeared the world's leading industrial powers would be able to duck dealing with the stalled international trade and tariff negotiations. Their failure could mean a ruinous worldwide trade war. U.S. officials insisted President Bush is committed to the trade talks' success.
He'll be looking for similar commitments from the other members and will reaffirm the need to redouble our efforts to unblock these negotiations.
What's blocking the negotiations is one issue: agriculture, principally European agriculture. Western European governments spend huge sums each year on subsidies that keep their farm prices artificially low on world markets. It's killing poorer farm countries which can't compete in such rigged markets, and they won't sign a new world trade agreement until they get relief. Last year at the Houston Economic Summit, Mr. Bush made agriculture and trade his top priorities. His hard-nosed trade negotiator, Carla Hills, was everywhere in evidence pushing for a deal. This year, she isn't even here, even though the official deadline for the talks expired in December. The president had to fight to get his negotiating authority for the trade talks, what's called fast track, renewed by Congress. But the U.S. delegation, despite its words, seems in no fighting mood here.
I think the fact that the president expended an enormous amount of political capital on getting the fast track legislation through indicates that the United States is here ready to go.
Ready to go means the U.S. would take a trade deal if one came, but the administration is in no hurry. U.S. farmers and other interests get subsidies too, and a trade agreement would cut them, triggering a political storm in Congress just in time for next year's election. Britt Hume, ABC News, London.
It has become very clear over the last several months just how deeply determined, some would argue desperate, Mikhail Gorbachev was to be included in this summit meeting. If he can plug the Soviet Union into Western economic prosperity, he may be able to stop the Soviet Union from sliding into further economic and political chaos. The 7 leaders here have seen the latest Gorbachev ideas for economic reform, and they think he still hasn't got it. Here's our Moscow Bureau Chief, Jim Laurie.
The disappointment with what is known so far of Gorbachev's plans was reflected by a cautious French President Mitterrand, who noted many difficulties in giving aid to Moscow. The British press reflected feelings that the Soviet program did not go far enough toward embracing private property and private enterprise. Gorbachev's leanings seem to be confirmed by the fact his radical economic advisor, Grigory Yavlinsky, said he would not be joining Gorbachev in London. Harvard economists who worked with Yavlinsky on a comprehensive reform package fear Gorbachev will stick to a conservative program.
There is nothing coherent in this program, and there is no very definite move to the market in a way that will prevent the further collapse of the economy.
Amid the doubts, Gorbachev's spokesman played down expectations, saying just being invited here was a great achievement. And no one, he said, ever expected Gorbachev would go home with his black ZIL limousine stuffed with cash.
Maybe not, but the Soviets did and still do want more than they're likely to get here. The promise of technical advice on just how to take radical economic steps if they really want to. Jim Laurie, ABC News, London.
Here in London, hopes are running high that a Soviet-American treaty on reducing strategic nuclear arms is just one hurdle away, even though the single remaining hurdle is how to deal with a new Soviet missile. Here's ABC's Barry Dunsmore.
It is the next generation of these long-range missiles which have become the problem. ABC News has been told by administration officials that the last stumbling block to the treaty to cut such weapons is a new type of Soviet missile which is very close to production. The problem is that the payload of the new missile slightly exceeds one of the limits negotiated this weekend in Washington.
This is a particularly difficult question because while it's technical in nature, it goes to the political issue of future missile development and construction.
If Gorbachev gives in, he will have to order his military to scrap or make major modifications on the new missile system. Not only will this be very expensive, but it could further antagonize the top Soviet military who feel they have already been forced to accept too many concessions. If Mr. Bush decides to give the Soviets enough leeway to build their new missile, he will upset some of his military experts and the Republican Party's right wing. That could make Senate ratification of the treaty difficult.
To put it as politely as possible, the Soviets are cheats and liars and scoundrels.
Presidents Bush and Gorbachev could make a deal when they meet on Wednesday, but the Soviets have especially not wanted to finish the treaty here for fear that people would say Gorbachev was selling out on arms control to get Western economic aid. Tonight, senior American officials say they don't know what is going to happen. Barry Dunsmore, ABC News, London.
In a moment, the leaders here at the summit warn Iraq a full accounting of nuclear capabilities or else. In the other news, new guidelines for doctors and dentists on when to be tested for AIDS. And finally this evening, the English tradition of bell ringing. Much more than just pulling ropes.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings in London. Brought to you by new Nabisco shredded wheat.
Economic summits always have extensive other political agendas. British officials said here today there is strong support among the 7 leaders for keeping the pressure on Saddam Hussein until they are satisfied that he has revealed all about his nuclear program. Iraq sent another list of facilities over the weekend. The Bush administration says not enough. Here's ABC's Bob Zelnick.
U.S. officials today said the latest document from the Iraqis provides details about facilities already known to the UN rather than a full accounting of their nuclear weapons program.
We have seen a number of previous so-called complete declarations, and frankly, we're skeptical.
At the UN Security Council, members are close to agreement on a resolution condemning Iraq for not allowing UN inspectors to see all its facilities. Over the weekend, French President Mitterrand agreed to support a bombing raid if Iraq does not cooperate. Today, the British agreed.
One way or another, we are going to prevent Iraq becoming a nuclear power.
A report released by UN inspectors today on what they had been able to see showed a nuclear program that is a long way from producing a bomb. The Iraqis were using devices called calutrons, similar to those developed by the United States during World War II. The report says a pilot project at Tuatha produced at most 1/3 of the enriched uranium needed to make a single bomb. The much larger Taimyr facility was 6 to 18 months from operation before the war. Both places were heavily damaged. There may be more to see, but the main reason for the Allied concern is not that Iraq's nuclear weapons program was so far advanced. Rather, it's that the Iraqis defied the Allies by denying its existence. Then they tried to hide what they could from international inspection. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
In the Arab world today, there is